Hi, everyone, and good Wednesday to you. I'm Christian Myers, Alicia Silberg's business partner. Alicia is attending an important African summit on impact investing and won't be joining us today, but I'll be filling into those very big shoes. Welcome to our discussion of smart cities and the future of transportation, a domain where companies and governments are working to combine the physical and digital worlds, capitalize on safer, more efficient transportation, and improve and protect our urban centers. As populations cluster in global urban centers, the need for integrated planning and the application of smart technologies and better transportation will rapidly increase. All of us who live within and rely upon these urban centers will experience the day-to-day as well as the macroeconomic, social, security, environmental, and sustainability implications of our smart planning, smart technology use, and transportation choices. Having had the great opportunity to travel and being an urban dweller myself, I often note the differences in how cities perform and even compete relative to one another across regions and countries. How does the metro feel in San Francisco versus, say, the metro in London or Montreal? So I am particularly interested in this topic, and I think it's one of the things we'll see separating regions and cities in the future. How will well-planned, well-architected, well-resourced cities in, say, the emerging markets surpass their counterparts in developed markets? How will differences in our relative long-range thinking or political systems provide certain urban centers with advantages that will then enhance their regions and countries? Whatever our roles as citizens, government leaders, business people, entrepreneurs, and financial market participants, our urban centers will play a defining role in shaping our societies, daily human experiences, security, health, and economies. We are here to understand more so that we can become informed participants and perhaps direct participants in this important conversation, effort, and economic opportunity. Again, I'm Christian Myers, filling in for my co-host, Alicia Silberg. I'm excited to be here. We are Street Global Venture Capital, and this is our weekly edition of Entrepreneurs Wednesday's Fireside Chat. I'm broadcasting to you today from San Francisco, California, where I can see our changing urban architecture out of my window, and where I'm a regular user of public transportation as well as new forms of transportation, such as ride sharing. I had the pleasure of visiting London, where this show is being produced, and noting the differences and noting how the first underground railway is still in use in this thriving, developing city. I'm grateful to be joined by some incredible, special entrepreneurs, investors, and organizational leaders working with smart technology and transportation innovation who are coming to us from around the globe and taking the time to share their valuable insights so we can learn from them. So, for those of you who don't know, our topic today is smart cities, the future of transportation, and what does the future hold in store? Now that you've got excited about our topic, let me please go ahead and introduce to you our VIP guests before asking them to properly introduce themselves to you. Welcome to California-based Eduardo Javier Munoz. Welcome to DC-based Robert Katz. Welcome to San Francisco, California-based Jack Crawford. Welcome to Atakan Azbek from Istanbul, Turkey. Welcome to Nurlan Ashirbekov, based out of Kazakhstan. And welcome to Chris Smedley, based out of Toronto, Canada. Just before we jump into our questions, let me please ask our community of panelists to introduce themselves properly. Let's start with Eduardo. Eduardo, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Eduardo Munoz. Our company, Arc Bravo Group, is in the US since 2012. We are developing systems of connected electric vehicles with driverless capabilities into artificial intelligence platforms. Our purpose and objective is to reduce the cost and transit time of transporting people and goods in urban environments, and
Very important.
obviously reducing emissions and enhancing productivity in our economies.
Excellent, Eduardo. Thank you for joining us. Turning to Robert. Robert, could you please introduce yourself?
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the honor to be here among all of these esteemed panelists. Thank you to Lisa and Chris for having us and for putting on this amazing event for us to connect with our citizens of the world and of this planet. So I've been proud to have been contributing to this important topic of smart cities since I began at MIT in 1987. Ironically, starting with the Star Wars program and NASA and bringing many of those technologies, as we say, back down to earth. And I focus on driving people-powered innovation and creating strong innovation ecosystems through that people power, mostly by establishing strong cybersecurity and interoperability standards. So I know standards are not the most sexy and part of the conversation, but cybersecurity and interoperability standards are among the most important, because just like the internet, it creates an acceleration platform where everybody on this call and everybody in the community can join in the progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I agree. A very important point. If we extend the use of digital technologies and become more reliant on them, they have to be reliable, durable, and secure. Excited to hear your thoughts as we proceed.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's our pleasure. Jack, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Thank you to everyone. And thanks to the panelists here as well for joining. My name is Jack Crawford. I am CEO of Datalog.ai. And as you heard, we're a startup based in San Francisco. Our solution is focused on natural language for industry and NGOs. We primarily focused in insurance and healthcare, and we're bringing conversational agents, otherwise known as chatbots and virtual assistants, to solve issues and problems there. But we're also supporting NGOs. One particular one is with an initiative called Smart Villages in India, which I believe will be expanding to other countries in due course. I was in the pharmaceutical industry for 10 years and then consulting in those other industries that I mentioned for several years. This is my third company. I'm really excited in this particular one because AI is hot, and we believe that there's more opportunity for good than bad, and we're trying to make our contribution to that through systems of engagement. I graduated from George Washington University with an undergraduate degree in chemistry, and then I got my graduate degree from Claremont Graduate University in California. Thank you.
Very good. Welcome, Jack. Turning our attention to Chris. Chris, would you please introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. How are you? It's great to be here. It's certainly going to be a lot of fun. My name's Chris Medley, and I'm coming from the perspective of exponential organizations and technology and the futurist space for, I guess, about 2 decades now. And as a byproduct of that, I am involved in discussions with nations and corporations about the effects of exponential technology and how we can best apply them to address global challenges. And to that extent, I have a number of startups that are looking to address global challenges and how we can apply this technology and what the trends are to build basically the 21st century. So today, I'm speaking on behalf of a company called Digital Habitats. And what they do is that they build for advanced architecture, buildings and infrastructure and transportation systems in an autonomous city as a platform type model. And we're applying our development in large scale projects and other urban situations, but predominantly we're looking at travel and destination themes, that kind of scenario.
Excellent.
And so a large portion of our our work is involved in providing resilience on these coastal facilities. So that's the real challenge that we're trying to do.
Resilience is an important theme. Thank you very much. Turning our attention to Atakan. Atakan, would you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm thrilled to be here with this distinguished speakers on the panel. My name is Atakan Özbek. I'm a managing director of an international the group that develops renewable energy and natural resources that go into the future, the mobility solutions like the batteries and also the solar, the energy that goes into the smart cities as well in a decentralized way. I've been covering the sector actually almost 17, 18 years. I syndicated a study on the smart grids and smart cities as early as 2005. So this is an early topic on myself. I'm thrilled to be in this panel, and I pretty much look forward to contributing to.
Thank you very much for joining us. And I'd like to mention we have an exciting thing happening today. Our panelist, Nurlan, is working through a translator. So we're going to give him a little bit of extra time to speak when he does. Nurlan, would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Oscar, and I'm going to be talking on behalf of Nurlan today. And basically, to be brief, what we do at our company is that we have a company named Cyfro. And at Cyfro, we specialize in the research and developments in the field of artificial intelligence. So recently, we have developed a disruptive technology that has allowed us to begin the realization of a web platform for joint development of IT projects. That is all based on computational intelligence system. And so, for example, when we're talking about development of IT projects, why have we started this company is that today we face a huge number of loss of money and time over developing IT projects, where on our platform, it solves the problems of collaboration, where both the developers, designers, and the IT project owners, they can collaborate and design any kind of IT products together. And so based on this, there's also an exchange of experience and knowledges as well on the global scale.
Very good.
Basically,
Thank you, Oscar, and thank you, Nurlan. Certainly collaboration when we talk about smart cities is going to be a huge topic.
Yes, we understand that.
Very good. Thank you for joining us. And I'm Christian Myers, Alicia Silberg's business partner at Street Global Venture Capital. My background is I was fortunate enough to help build two of the largest enterprise software cloud computing companies, Salesforce.com and SuccessFactors. I now have the great fortune to work with some dedicated, committed, exciting founders as a seed stage investor. Alicia and I work with companies that are addressing some of the world's biggest challenges in areas such as infrastructure, computing access, communications access, security, health, and finance. And I will be hosting our panel. Before we jump into questions and start to learn, on the screen are contact details for our panelists. Please feel free to reach out to them. Don't forget to keep sending your questions through to inspire me at onlinefiresidechat.com, and we'll try to include them. Given how many of you are joining us today, we have community champions managing the chat room. So if you have a question for one of our guest panelists, please pose your question in the chat window, and we'll try to answer it. Some of our community champions will also be helping with any business-related questions you may have. Just as a reminder, we have community champions and ever-growing meetup groups in various cities around the globe, and this is very exciting. In North and South America, the UK, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, India, Asia, and Australia. If you'd like to meet up with one of your local chapters or would like to start your own, please reach out to us via email and we'll put you in contact with the local champion. On that note, thank you very much to all our volunteer champions from around the globe. We couldn't do it without you. You're the heart of the community, and we wouldn't be here today without you. Over the next few months, with your help, we'll be sharing with and inspiring entrepreneurs across more than 100 countries. Together, we can make that happen. And thank you again for the base of our growing family of supporters and collaborators from around the world who are once again hosting sessions for hundreds of entrepreneurs who do not have access to the necessary bandwidth and or a primary understanding of the English language. Thank you to the government ministries, UN offices, US embassy corners, British Council offices, university campuses, schools, business incubators, chambers of commerce and community centers, community radio sessions, for all of your ongoing weekly hosting support and for raising awareness within your regions and communities. Thank you to everyone from our UN Women's Empowerment Team. Alicia is a UN champion for entrepreneurship and women's empowerment, for all your support as well. We're streaming across new live platforms today. Once again, if you'd like to share us with your community and have a community radio station that you'd like us to broadcast from, please make sure to let us know. Thank you very much. Now, let's learn. Our topic is smart cities and the future of transportation. What does the future hold? And I'd like to start off with an easy but important question. This question goes to Atakan. What is a smart city?
I see smart city as the habitats where basically quality of life is emboldened and hopefully gives a fair access to everybody, every of the citizens, where you basically get the citizens get a fair share and then use the resources more effectively and in more secure way. So it basically integrates everything from the cars you drive or you get to drive from one point to the next point with the transportation, with the devices, all of the smart devices, basically Internet of Things devices with smart chips into the street lights. Basically, that gives you the information on the moisture, or let's say the wind speed or air quality. If there's a radiation, if there's a terrorist attack, or any form of information that basically gathers and that increases the quality of. That's how I view smart city in a broad sense.
Thank you, Atakan. I like the way you started that by talking about the goals and the goals for the people that live in the cities. Excellent. Chris, turning to you, can you build on that? What is a smart city so that our audience has a grounding concept for a smart city?
Yeah, I can build on that, I think. From our perspective, we're really looking at the autonomization of all of the infrastructure as well as the habitats and the transportation. So ultimately, our technology is turning into robots of sort. So the way that we look at the city, the smart city, is not as a ICT or AI play that connects the sensors and all of that, but more as a transition from static, unintelligent structures and infrastructure to intelligent adaptive systems that are anticipatory. It's a next evolution from where we're thinking now. And so for a lot of our projects, that definition of a smart city actually means it has to be a new city.
Very good.
You know, there's a large question there on whether you can retrofit some of our mega cities in order to get the best functionality for the citizens.
I think we'd all agree with that. One of the questions for our existing urban centers is how will we transition from the current infrastructure to a smart infrastructure? And I know Eduardo has some things to add there. Eduardo, would you like to build on what we've been talking about, please?
Oh, yes. Smart cities, we have been talking about different, words that come to everybody's paragraphs when they would need to address about something. But smart cities, now is blockchain. But generally, what smart cities mean, in our opinion, we have a group here in NASA Ames Research Center in which we discuss about this whole time. But in our opinion, as Chris has been saying, we need to first integrate. But the main thing about smart cities is about efficiency. We've been building our cities and our societies far away from efficiency, and we can't afford that anymore. So in the integration in which you connect energy, transportation, communications, and water, we need to understand that all of that is, in a sense, energy, and need to integrate that in a very profound way. so we can actually have efficiency in our cities. The other thing is, there's not smart city without sustainability.
Mhm.
And in that terms, I mean, we have just seen a report from UN talking about 9 million people dying because of pollution in cities. And
Yes.
so I can't believe we can talk about smart cities without talking about reducing emissions and pollution in cities.
Well said. To recap, our panelists have just shared their concepts on smart cities and talked about how cities must serve their citizens and the people that visit them. It's not just about the infrastructure serves daily human goals and long-range goals. Various technologies can be applied to enhancing the performance and efficiency of cities. The question of how we're going to do that with existing cities versus developing new habitats is a big one that we're going to be discussing today. And then the question of energy and sustainability as we move forward. How do we both improve the environment for citizens as well as optimize our use of energy? Another planning question for the developers of cities and environments. On that note, let's turn to the question of what are the different elements? We've touched on some like energy, there are others like water. Robert, would you please talk to our audience about the different elements and the layers of a smart city so that we have an even deeper understanding of the complexity of what we're talking about?
Sure, I will give it a try. I guess that's the problem with these things being unscripted, but that's the audience benefits from the spontaneity. So yeah, it is multi-layered, and we do need to start with strong foundations. Certainly the strongest foundation, as we mentioned, are the goals. And you've done a great job, everybody here in the panel, of articulating the need for these to be people-centric and how the infrastructure and everything needs to serve the goals of the people. We have to be mindful of that moving target, that those goals change. The people are sort of erratic creatures, unfortunately, and sometimes less predictable than the computer systems we like to usually build. So we need to build that type of forward thinking into the model. So as we start to build up from this foundation, we're starting from the goals, we look at working to make sure that we're building some strong infrastructure pieces into our infrastructure pieces, so to speak. And two of the most important foundational elements of those infrastructures are security and interoperability, as we mentioned. So it's pretty obvious that security is important, but we usually only have it come secondarily to functionality. And really we need to think of them together, because unless the functionality can be deployed securely, it doesn't provide any function. As a matter of fact, it can provide quite the opposite. So we've seen already certain cases, and I don't want to be a downer, but we just need to be mindful, because as we start to move already towards the proliferation of IoT technologies and devices, which in some cases we could look at as the Lego pieces, the building blocks. I don't want to call them the bricks because that would be sort of going backwards into a metaphor, which I don't want to do. But we look at those Lego pieces that we build into creating these smart cities. We have to make sure that we have security as we're building them and putting them together. That goes even to look at the supply chain. Where are those IoT pieces coming from? And making sure that everybody that's touching those has all of our best interests in mind. So as we then build those together into the system, we want to make sure that they are built upon not just security, but standards. So standards, as I said at the beginning, sound boring, but they're actually so critical, and we really take it for granted. I mean, imagine if your light bulbs, right, when you went to the store to replace your light bulb, you had to worry about how much current your light socket had, and what type of how it's screwed in and all of that. So, you know, we take for granted that standards allow a proliferation of choices and also allow large participation by many different groups of people. So everybody in this call, for instance, calling from all over the world, but because there's certain standards on the internet that's established a foundational platform, we all can communicate and connect with each other. And similarly, we're working hard, specifically at NIST and that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology as part of the Department of Commerce, along with a number of international similar bodies throughout the world on creating these standards so that we can have unified platforms that can allow people who have great ideas to come in and just focus on the application.
Thank you, Robert.
Infrastructure.
Thank you very much. I just want to highlight what Robert was sharing with us. We're talking about, he used the acronym IoT, and that's an acronym that stands for the Internet of Things. It refers to the use of sensors and other devices in a network fashion. And a very important topic as we think about cities and transportation of the future is that if we network them, if we connect them, how will we maintain their security? So thank you very much, Robert, for highlighting that. And then I just would like to ask Oscar and Nerlin, would you like to build on anything that Robert has been just talking about, please?
Well, basically, we don't really have anything to add to what Robert has just said. But if you just ask our question is, how do we see the smart city? That's where we could say a few words.
Please.
Okay, so basically, as my father said, like, how do we see the smart city and what it means to us? It is all about self-organizing systems, whereas we see that everyone would sense their worth as each individual, those that could realize their inner potentials and as well as skills. And so in a smart cities, we don't see no vertical interaction between people, but we see only horizontal. But when we ask our question is, how do we achieve that and what we need for that? What we need is neutral computational constructions along with digital interaction processes. And this is basically what we want to add to this topic.
Thank you. Well said. And I know that Atakan would like to build on what we've just been talking about. We've been talking about the different elements and layers of a smart city, highlighting the use of network technologies, standards, and security. Atakan? I believe we may have lost Atakan or maybe on mute temporarily.
Chris?
Yes.
I like that. I would agree with what everything just said by Robert and also with Nerlin. But more on the deployment side, I would like to add the things like smart meters. So basically different elements in the layers of a smart city. So when we look at the smart city, we're going to be seeing the different deployments of the technologies. So I would start with smart meters that basically the water, electricity, and renewable energy, the sources. Smart waste, like smart bins, okay? And then you have the transportation technologies like vehicle to everything and vehicle to vehicle technologies that basically they can read each other, okay? And then you have the LED street lights. These are all smart street lights, as I just mentioned in the beginning of my conversation, where basically street lights are not just street lights, they're electric efficient, but at the same time, they can be also multi-purpose. They can serve as a EV charging stations, electric vehicle charging stations. They can give up the information about the data, near real-time data, not real-time, but near real-time. All smart parking or electric mobility or first respond communication systems. So these are all the different layers that I see in a smart city that I just wanted to add upon what already been said by Robert and Nerlin. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Yes, and to our audience, as Atakan just illustrated, it's easy for us, many of us are technologists on this conversation, to focus on the digital and networked aspects, but we're also talking about real resources, things such as water, things such as the street form that we inhabit as we walk down the street. It's an incredibly complex topic. I have a feeling we're going to be doing other shows on this topic. As Atakan highlighted transportation, one of the layers of a smart city, I'd like to pose a question to Eduardo, please. Eduardo, transportation is something we experience every day. What does the future of transportation look like in smart cities?
Well, transportation is what I breathe for years now. So yes.
Give us your vision for the future, what you think is likely, what you think might happen, and what you think is improbable, please.
Well, what will happen, I would say, and I think nowadays everybody's starting to agree on that, and I'm sure that Robert will agree with me. What we will have is shared platforms of driverless vehicles, moving people and goods in a very efficient way. Vehicles of different sizes combining from origin to destination, having a very efficient way of combining. There's a study from the International Transport Forum saying that if we have shared driverless vehicles to move people in cities, we would have 90% of the vehicles redundant of the vehicles we have today. So just imagine how your city might look like with only one of every 10 vehicles you have today in the streets. Cities will change because parking lots will be obviously not needed anymore, and obviously less traffic will mean less transit times. Cities will change pretty much with the future of transportation we are envisioning.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. I just want to highlight that point. We often think about new forms of transportation and autonomous transportation in terms of what it means for us as consumers of that, but it could change the entire landscape of cities. If we need fewer vehicles, we need fewer roads, fewer parking lots. That could solve problems such as housing. Across North America, for example, we have an incredible need for new housing. Robert, since we're talking about transportation, I know you have done some exciting work. I know that you worked on the very first autonomous vehicle, the Mars rover. Could you share with our audience your vision for what you think transportation will look like? What's likely, what might happen, and what is speculative? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Again, I do agree very much with Eduardo. I don't think we can actually, there's really no way to overstate the impact of evolving and changed transportation models and what the next generation of transportation will look like for a smart city. I mean, everything that we do, every minute of our day in a city is somehow touched by transportation, whether it's the obvious of where you're going and how you get there, but even the size of buildings and the structure of buildings are driven by how you get to the buildings and local codes that specify how many parking spaces per square foot you need for this type of structure versus that type of structure, how you would evacuate in case of emergency, but even the supply chain for the food, every cup of coffee that you drink within that smart city and the supply chain used to get that there. Once we look at how shared transportation, or as I call TaaS, transportation as a service, and the fact that you're not owning any infrastructure, transportation infrastructure yourself, and how that changes. And we look at taking a vehicle, as Eduardo said, that is currently has about a 3% utilization and changing it to 100% utilization, and what that means in terms of carbon footprints and density and access to resources. It's really hard to understate, and it's just come a long way since, as you correctly said, since I started working on smart transportation in the mid-90s when we put the Mars rover on Mars, and we had to autonomously through AI navigate it and worry about the security aspects of it as well, like we do now in terms of not just getting hacked by terrorists now, but getting hacked by Martians back then. So it's something that we need to always be aware of. And again, it's really hard to understate how it's going to change. I mean, think of, I'll just leave you with a thought. Imagine building new buildings that have docking stations on your porch, on your balcony for your autonomous drone to bring you your food and your latest order that you ordered 10 minutes ago from Amazon, which actually is fulfilled by the balloon, the aerostat hovering over the city, as they file patents for already. So it's just really hard to imagine. And I challenge all of you to really open up your mind and let your imagination be your guide.
Thank you very much, Robert. You touched on some important points, which are the rate of planning and development of cities has been slower than it will be. And with the introduction of new technologies, it's going to accelerate. And a big question I have, and I think our audience has, is how are we going to manage all this? Is it going to happen organically with the right guidelines? Is it going to happen in a centralized, planned way, and coordinated way? Or is it going to happen in a chaotic way? And on that topic, I know, Atakan, you've been involved with some very large projects. How will we coordinate the introduction of new forms of transportation and smart city technology into our urban centers? What have you seen working? Are there any examples that we can all study to better understand how to do it effectively?
Thanks. Well, I'd like to add actually a few things, what just Robert said. The transportation, and in a way, I'm hoping that, I can also answer some of the points that you just raised in this topic. Just remind me the major studies that we have conducted in the 2000s. Okay, this was about the hydrogen infrastructure. And in North America, we basically picked up the major metropolitan cities in North America and how much change, how much investment would have to be needed in the major metropolitan cities, from San Francisco to New York, and even we picked up cities like Toronto in Canada. And then it was all different type of the stakeholders. So you have the federal, and then you have the state level, and then you have the local level, and then you have the city level, right? So these are all the municipalities, city governments in the cities. And then you have the private sector, okay? The private sector basically covers everybody. You have the technology firms, and you have the research laboratories, and then you have the research universities like NREL, let's say, if it's National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So you have this in the North America, and then you have the whole colossal ecosystem of the Europe, EU 15, and then EU 27. And then you have the Asia Pac that used to be back then in 2000s, but now you have Japan has been there for a long time, but you have right now the China and India. So those are two major markets. And then China, it just basically changing the whole system, especially with this new transportation you were just referring to, let's say the battery electric vehicles. Electric vehicles basically being powered by the batteries. And then you have to take a look at it, as Robert pointed out, the whole supply chain. On one end, you have the standardization with the regulatory bodies that basically need to study and somehow intertwine that, just like the banking system or cryptocurrency that we may touch upon later in the show. But at the same time, you also have to take a look at where are all these the minerals that's going to come into the batteries, and how are they going to be basically making sure that, like lithium-ion batteries in our iPhones, in our Androids, is not going to blow up in the airplane, okay, or let's say in a train. So these are all different type of the questions that basically being addressed as we speak today in a very different formats, in very different applications. In Europe, you have in the cities like Milan, in Gothenburg in Sweden, and you have it in London. In the US, we have streetlights are being replaced in the New York City. You already have smart kiosks basically giving you the internet services. Basically, you pay with the advertising, but the taxpayer doesn't have to pay anything. And then Chicago is also replacing the LED streetlights, all 200,000 plus something by 2021 in 4 years. So these are all different type of the things that are really happening in the smart cities. And then the transportation basically sits in the heart of it, either the autonomous vehicles or driverless vehicles, and how are they going to be basically talk to each other and talk to the consumer on the road, and at the same time, as Robert pointed out, security and the standardization. So I think we're seeing the smaller scale deployments, and at the city level, at the state level, but we don't know as well. So it's basically the progress taking place, and then we get to see in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. One thing that gives me a much different hope, and what I'm seeing right now in the number of deployments that we expected to see in the previous decade with the fuel cell vehicles. None of that happened, basically. But right now, with the electrical vehicles and with the battery vehicles, these are basically happening in such tremendous amount of double-digit growth rates.
Very good.
40% in Chinese electrical vehicles, from 500,000 to 700,000 in just 1 year. So I'll just leave it at that right now.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to reflect back. Atakan touched on a very important range of topics, and I'm struck by the range and complexity of the topics. He talked about multi-layered political systems, the differences culturally in how we perceive and work with our urban environments, the legacy urban infrastructures we have today, as well as projects that are happening all around the world that are exciting. Improved lighting, which enhances safety, it enhances commerce, and improved transportation, more accessible transportation. In San Francisco, I'm struck by the fact that we have a wonderful new bike sharing program, but one of the legacies of our political system is that we have an incomplete rapid transit system. Our urban centers are not connected in a way they could have been, and that has created tremendous costs over the past several decades. And so I have an open question, and I'm sure we all do. How are we going to organize and manage these incredibly complex factors, sets, and systems? And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Nurlan. Nurlan, would you like to build on the topics we've been discussing?
Well, okay, yeah, I actually have a few things to add to this, what we have told and said. So basically, what we were talking about, for example, the fuels, about what kind of fuels we're going to be using in the future. Like, would it be organic, or would it be the fossil fuels that we're still using today? But the thing is that the way that how we see it, that it is not the problem. What is the main problem is the question is, would we be even using the standard transportation methods of today in the future, despite it being too futuristic? But it is something that the father of spaceships back in the USSR, Mr. Tsiolkovsky, has said. As for example, he also stated, people will say no to spaceships in the future, but they will find alternative means of transportation in the future. So that's why we can't really say much about the future. But what we can say is everything that we have today, the mechanical means of transportation, like planes, cars, taxis, and a lot of these things, and it will eventually come to stagnation. It eventually will, as because like we're living in one of the most developed cities in Kazakhstan, which is Almaty. It was the old capital of this country. Just like 5 years ago, there were no traffic jams at all. But right now, if you go into the city, even if there's no traffic jams, you will stand for hours and hours. As for example, if you take an example of Beijing to see, for example, how much air pollution do we have resulted there, as well as been there a lot, and too much people and too much means of transportations. And so here again, that's why we have referred to the father of spaceships, the Mr. Tsiolkovsky.
Thank you very much. So some incredibly deep comments here from our panelists. And one of the things that I'm struck by what Oscar and Nurlan have just said, as well as all of our panelists, is that each of the elements, there are so many elements and factors to smart cities. If we pick one, it's very hard to predict how those will materialize. For example, We may have autonomous cars, but if we develop better and better telecommuting technologies, will we need to have autonomous commuting vehicles? If we have drone delivery, does that eliminate the need for autonomous trucks? Many factors, more than we can easily hold in our minds, and each factor is very hard to predict given the number of possibilities and scenarios with each factor. So turning from the conceptual, our show is geared towards entrepreneurs and investors. Let's bring it down to the practical and to the business. I'd like to ask Chris, if you were advising entrepreneurs getting into the smart city and transportation space today, what would you tell an entrepreneur?
Think ahead. I think that a lot of the challenges that all entrepreneurs are facing is that they don't realize these are exponential technologies, not linear ones. And so the challenge is that I say every day to people, because of the rate of change of technology, we can now envision a future within 5 years that is Jetsons level. It's unheard of, as long as we put forth the right mindset and collaborate at the right level and don't get focused on, I found some little widget that works this way, but instead think globally and try and think of where you want to project yourself in 5 years or 10 years and make it big.
Thank you very much. Robert, if you were advising an entrepreneur looking to get into this space, what would you recommend to them? What would you recommend to them in terms of opportunities, the business models they construct, perhaps how they approach problems? What would you recommend to an entrepreneur?
So thank you very much. I couldn't agree more with everything that Eduardo and Chris and everybody just said. Things are moving faster than we can imagine. Literally, by the time you notice a problem, there are already competitors of yours working on a solution. So in some ways, you have to be thinking so far ahead that by the time you create the solution, people realize the problem. That's how far ahead you have to think about. You have to think almost at moonshot speed. It's really the biggest challenge to an entrepreneur is really not money, it's not talent, it's all speed and the need for speed and the need to address the problems quickly, because we are working at exponential, or what I call hyperspeed, or if you want, ludicrous speed. So it's a matter of thinking fast and thinking big, as people said already very, very well. We have to look at big challenges that will address large audiences throughout the world. And you have to, the way to accommodate that speed, so let me just not just give a problem, but give a solution, is through partnerships. You have to take advantage of people that you can leverage and leapfrog things that they're doing to help make their what they're doing better, and take you along at the same time. So look at, we just mentioned drone delivery, right? So maybe instead of having another drone delivery service, you're somehow doing some type of navigation or direction, or you're looking at countermeasures to counter drone delivery or something like that. But you really need to be looking ahead, and then how you can leverage what other people are doing to make theirs better through partnerships, because we can't do it alone.
Thank you very much. So for our audience, Robert mentioned some important themes for aspiring entrepreneurs that need to engage at a large scale with this complexity that's moving very fast. And I know that Atakan had some follow-up thoughts. Atakan, would you please share your thoughts on what you would advise entrepreneurs, perhaps around business models and finance? I know you've worked on some very large projects.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was on, and over the last 10 years, I'm on the operational and more on the commercial end of it. So to me, there are like 3 different ways. The first step is basically you have the fiscal incentives like tax abatements, and then the PPPs usually that's been done for any type of infrastructure. Let's not forget, this is all about infrastructure of the smart cities, right? But basically includes from everything from A to Z. And then you have the qualified infrastructure bonds that can really, like green bonds, okay? Green bonds are the topic that's been really growing up nicely. And then this is basically all focused on what the smart city requirements. And then you have the public sector basically encouraging all these private sector investments in the new smart city, maybe partnership models that will reduce the near-term cost, but at the same time, taxpayers don't have to pay for it. So just like in the example that I gave in the smart kiosks deployed in New York City, you have that's going to be deployed by the private sector. The taxpayer do not have to pay money. So basically, but the entrepreneur is going to basically to cover that from the financing end of it, and then going to split the revenues from the commercial, from the ads commercials. So that's
Thank
just
you very
one way
much.
of, yeah. So that would be one of the examples. Then advertising generated income, revenue from value-added analytics services. So big data is big. So if you type up any type of data is basically going to be used by all these technologies that's going to go into the smart cities backbone. So that's also another level. And one should also not forget the collaboration at the federal, state, and local collaboration levels. And this is basically for all special purpose vehicles on focusing on the potential innovation districts in the metropolitan areas. In China, I would just basically finalize with one thing before I let go on this topic. China is basically building a new city, if I'm not mistaken, 100 miles away from Beijing, south of Beijing. This is a completely new city, and basically they're inviting everybody. Why? Because Beijing is already too dirty, and the traffic is not maybe in a point of no return. So, but they have a new system, but they plan to invest up to $600 billion. That's the last I saw. So can you imagine? I mean, basically this is building a new city, cleaner, smarter, more equal, more fair for everybody. But at the same time, it's also incentivize the new investment as big as $600 billion. Now you come back to US, and we couldn't even finish the metro line in New York City in God knows how many years. So that's a contrast, okay, between the old world and new world.
Thank you very much. Two very important points that you raised. One is the incentive and financing schemes we'll need to actualize the potential of smart cities and new transportation. We've been talking about all these complexities and all these different factors, and we hadn't even addressed that, further illustrating the complexity of what we're talking about. And then the relative status and the relative changing statuses of cities around the globe. Certain countries that are building new cities now may have advantages over incumbents. And with that, I'd like to turn our question to Jack. Jack, would you please talk to our audience about the human implications and the human side of smart cities, the people side, as well as what you're seeing across the globe? What do you think about differences geographically speaking?
Yes, that's great. Thank you. So I've posed this. We've been talking about technology for the most of this call, and we see tremendous investment in China. Let's say there's another city in South China called Panyu. There's a project with UC Berkeley Haas that has the other end of the spectrum, and that's in India. And they're doing a project in the Andhra Pradesh province. And it's a small village, was their first one. They're going to seek to do more. This village has 8,000 people, but 500 of them are abroad trying to earn money to send back to their home because the market's changed. And they predominantly, their income is from coconuts, rice, textiles, and shrimp. They're a coastal city. The project is designed to bring technology and access for villagers to run their businesses better. So for example, a manufacturer of saris can really only sell locally because they have no access to markets. But with new infrastructure, Wi-Fi, simple things like that, the ability to use phones to develop a business plan, there's actually a very neat application for that, can now open up an entire market over the world for saris, and only a small amount is needed to provide income to this businessman to grow that local region. Right now, there are 650,000 villages in India, and a number of people either migrated away or into the cities in India, and it's a crisis in infrastructure. Simply, people need to stay in villages and succeed. So this is the idea of smart cities going to smart villages. And a village is a city, it's just a much smaller one.
Fascinating.
And, one other thought, if I could add, is the impact of history and arts and culture as we move to those cities like we see in China, where they're brand new cities, that people are going to have trouble, whether they want to go there or not, is that our lifespans are expanding and the rates of change are dramatically increasing, which increases anxiety, fear of change. But there are others at Gen Z that may not have fear of change, they have the fear of missing out. So you have a balance there. So culture and art's very important because there's no history in these new cities. They don't have like what we have in San Francisco.
Thank you very much for raising that. It
Sure.
really highlights how we're going to have to change our cultural norms and our behaviors at the individual and community level to engage with these new opportunities as well as the challenges that come with them. I'd like to pose the same question to Oscar and Nerlin, please. We're getting close to wrapping up here, but we have a global audience and we are all people. I'd like to pose the same question. Can you comment on the people side as well as the geographic side of smart cities in the future of transportation? Thank you.
Well, okay, so let me start from Beijing, as we have talked a lot about it. And so what basically we want to say is, as for example, me and my father, Nerlin, we have lived in Shanghai for over 6 years, and we also spent a couple of years living in the south of China too. And what we have seen there is, after years, the expansion of people, the expansion of infrastructure, the expansion of cars, vehicles, it has all made it to the point where it caused air pollutions, where it caused a lot of problems as traffic jams and a lot of crowd being together. As why was the reason is as because the land is scarce and it is limited. The space where people can live is really limited. Like for example, we take Hong Kong as an example. What we see there is we have people living in only 4 square meters apartments there, as the land is just not enough for people right now. And when we're living back in Kazakhstan, in Almaty, we never had a problem like that. We thought like there's enough space, as Kazakhstan has only 50 million people. I mean, thought it's like, yeah, I mean, it's okay. We can have like even 100 million people living here. But no, every city is filled with so many people right now. And plus there are a lot of immigrations and foreigners coming to Kazakhstan as well. And we are facing the same problems that Beijing does. Our old capital, Almaty, was so green and the nature was everything is good. But right now, everything is just way beyond polluted. And the government and the people, we cannot do anything about it. As because we have stated earlier that what we need is another type of structures and what we need is to change.
Thank you very much, Oscar and Nerlin. Thank you very much. That's an important addition to this. What is the role of nature in our development of smart cities? And also, how do we manage the legacy implications of choices we may have made that are negatively impacting the environment? Thank you very much. We have to wrap up now, and we're going to ask a few exciting questions to get everyone thinking before we do. I want to say thank you very much to this incredibly interesting, diverse, and experienced panel that's taking time from their days to join us from around the globe. Panelists, please give some thought to this question. We're going to go real quick around. Can you tell us what industry you think is ripe for disruption in 2018? And I'm going to start with Eduardo. Eduardo, could you tell us what industry you think is ripe for disruption in 2018?
Wow. Well, I would say financial industry, but that affects mainly transportation, energy. So I would say that in this new world, there's not only one thing that you can touch and not affect anybody else. So those are my guess.
Thank you. Robert, what industry is ripe for disruption in 2018?
Everyone.
I was waiting for someone to say that.
And in fact, I think we need to look for what are new industries that we don't even know about, that we haven't even thought about. And we seriously I mean, unfortunately, disruption, not to end on a negative note, disruption is sort of a code word for, getting rid of the people that do the work and having machines and automation do it. And we enjoy the benefit of that, but we do need to look for new opportunities for the amazing talent and innovation that the people can bring, and the thought leadership that we can get from crowdsourcing and bringing everybody's intelligence and everybody to the table to contribute to some of these hard problems. So
thank you.
Yep.
I like the way you answered. Jack, real quick, what industry is ripe for disruption in 2018?
I would say social work. That's the one area where artificial intelligence will not make a big impact of automation in the next 10 to 20 to 30 years. That's not the part that we need human touch. And because of the loss of jobs, people are going to need to help with change. 2 million truck drivers in America will lose their jobs in the next 3 to 4 years, in my estimate. And when you're at home drinking a beer rather than driving a truck, it's going to be a challenge.
Thank you. Atakan, what industry is ripe for disruption in 2018?
Tough question. I think cryptocurrency and then tying up with some form of the exchange of electricity between the individual users, and then that also ties up with the IoT devices.
Thank you.
My guess.
Nurla and Oscar, what industry is ripe for disruption in 2018?
Well, for that question, would actually say that is IT and programming industry. As why is because right now, even medicine, schools, education, a lot of things is all related to programming and to IT.
Thank you.
For example, working a simple job, you should know what's programming.
Thank you. And Chris, could you please wrap up our panelists' comments on what industries we think are ripe for disruption in 2018? What's your take?
And my take on it is I'll give you a new industry that probably nobody's heard of, but it's an area that we've been involved in, and it's resilient rebuilding. So we, for example, we're headed towards the Bahamas before Irma hit to talk to the government about storm preparedness and new kinds of structures. And we're currently engaged throughout the Caribbean trying to put in new advanced infrastructure and solutions, fabrication, and basically revolutionize construction so that when we take Paris Climate Accord money, low carbon, low vulnerability, that we're rebuilding the planet the way that we want our infrastructure to be.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all. Very exciting and provocative comments coming in our wrap-up questions. I can assure the audience that we're going to revisit the topic of smart cities and transportation. You would be fascinated by the background chat and information the panelist group has been sharing. We obviously have a lot more to go with this topic. It affects us all. It is global. It is a big opportunity for everyone. We look forward to revisiting it. Panelists, real quick, we're going to ask each of you for a tweet piece of advice. So remember, this is a single sentence piece of advice before we wrap up the show. So we're going to go really quickly through everyone. Eduardo, what's your tweet piece of advice for the audience?
Well, my piece of advice is start thinking about a new world in which existing jobs won't exist.
Thank you.
That's my only, I would say, counsel to the audience.
Thank you. Important. Robert.
Think big, think fast, think partnerships.
Jack.
Yes, we can apply what we learn from smart cities to co-innovate with small communities.
Thank you. Atakan.
Decentralized grid, cryptocurrency medium for future.
Thank you. Oscar Nerland.
Well, we can't really tell everyone what to do. So what we want to say is that people should act.
Thank you.
Потому что призываем, мы ничего не можем.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that would-
Chris.
Use technology to craft your best future self.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for these practical, conceptual, and philosophical thoughts. We're all going to do our best to digest and apply them. Thank you, everyone, for this truly amazing session, and to all of our expert panelists for joining. Just to keep you posted on our upcoming sessions with some of the world's best joining us again as panelists, We're going to be featuring a show on the future of cryptocurrencies. What will the next 20 years look like? That will be on November 8th. On November 15th, we're going to talk about the future of food, our new technologies, business innovations, and startups leading the way to a healthier planet and a more food secure world. Everyone, remember to keep us up to date on all of your progress in business and life and exciting news. We'd love to highlight your successes in our weekly newsletter. You can drop us an email at inspireme@onlinefiresidechat.com. Also, join us on Twitter. You can find us at StepUpTF or #FiresideChat or connect online. Our community champions and panelists are all on LinkedIn. And please don't forget, if you enjoy the session today and feel there are other people that may benefit from the Fireside Chats, please remember to share the invitations as we need your help to get to our 100-country goal. Finally, before we sign off, I want to just remind everyone to feel grateful and appreciate what we have. It's a changing world, and there is no greater gift to yourself than gratitude. Thanks again, everyone. Have a truly amazing week ahead. Remember to keep hustling and never give up. And I'm going to ask our panelists on the count of 3. Let's all join together and say bye to our global audience. 1, 2, 3. Bye.
Hello, friends.
Bye.